down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast, and I have such a jam-packed show for you tonight. It is chock full of all kinds of information. I have a feeling that I am not going to be able to get to everything that I want to talk about. So do yourself a favor and go and check out the descriptions in the videos on my Rumble account especially, but also on YouTube, because that's the easiest places to find the descriptions. You can also look it up on Facebook too, because Facebook will have it as well. But there is a literal crap ton of links in the description because of the fact that this is so jam-packed. So much has happened in the last, 4 or 5 days since I streamed last. I know I streamed on Saturday, but I also told everybody on social media that I would not talk about the Twitter dump until tonight. Some new information has come to light about that, and so it is just mind-blowing and mind-boggling. But before I get to that, of course, I have to tell you what I am drinking tonight. Tonight, I am drinking my Redbreast single pot still Irish whiskey aged 12 years. That is what I have in my glass tonight. And let me go ahead and get that. I am drinking it neat with, of course, my little whiskey stones in there. That is some good stuff right here. All right. I also want to call your attention, because I'm not sure if anybody noticed, but I want to call your attention. In the store, I have a new product. This is a hat that has my saying, my motto on it. When I drink, I think Whiskey Musings. It is embroidered directly into the hat. This is a dad cap with a proper bend on the brim, not that flat snap back kind of stuff that everybody else wants to go ahead and use. This is a dad cap with the brim, the bent brim, and you can actually bend it even a little more. I think it looks great. It only comes in black and white for now. And go and check out my store.whiskeymusings.online. That link is also in the description as well. And right now I'm running a special gift to you. If you use promo code Christmas, all capital letters, you'll get free shipping on all products that you order from store.whiskeymusings.online. All right. Today is Pearl Harbor Day. And what was Pearl Harbor? Well, Pearl Harbor was the attack on America. Pearl Harbor is out, obviously, in the Hawaiian Islands. I think it's on the Big Island. It was our naval base out there, and it was the attack by the Imperial Japanese at the time, which, of course, kicked America in the butt and made us enter World War II. Not only that, but it also gave us the galvanized steel that we always seem to have, at least we've had so far in all of our conflicts. Oh, my apologies. 3 Chevy corrects me. It's on Oahu. But anyway, so it galvanized America and made us really want to get involved, not only in Europe, although up until that point, we had been supplying munitions and supplies and a few things over to our European allies at the time. But the reality is that we didn't really get into the war until the Japanese attacked us on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, I believe it's 81 years ago today. That was a Sunday morning when they decided to make their attack. And I'm going to do something that I usually reserve this for Saturdays, but because this is a special special day, I'm going to go ahead and read from the American Patriots Almanac. This is a book by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb. You can pick this up where all books are sold. It is a fantastic consolidation of a bunch of American historical facts, figures, people involved, etc., etc. So I'm going to go ahead and get that kicked off here right now with On This Day in American History. All right, Sunday, December 7th, 1941 began as a serene morning at the U.S. Navy base on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. The warships of the America's Pacific Fleet rested at anchor. Many sailors were preparing for church or relaxing, and all was quiet at Pearl Harbor. At about 7:55 a.m., a buzz from the sky broke the calm as a dive bomber bearing the red symbol of the rising sun of Japan dropped out of the clouds. Seconds later, a swarm of Japanese warplanes followed. Sirens wailed as explosions sounded all across the harbor, and black smoke poured into the sky. American sailors scrambled to battle stations while the Japanese planes screamed in for the kill. The main targets were several huge battleships moored in the harbor. Anti-aircraft guns roared to life, but they did little good. Bombs and torpedoes hit ship after ship. The Arizona, the Oklahoma, the California, the West Virginia, the Utah, the Maryland, the Pennsylvania, the Tennessee, the Nevada. Sailors fought to save their ships, their comrades, and their own lives. Much of the California's crew abandoned ship after flames engulfed its stern, while the captain determined the battleship might be saved. Yeoman Darrell Connor hoisted the American flag from the stern. At the sight of the colors, the sailors returned to fight the fires and keep her afloat. Despite such heroism, the attack reduced much of the fleet to smoldering wreckage. The Japanese planes disappeared into the sky, leaving 2,400 dead, 1,200 wounded, and 18 ships and more than 300 American planes destroyed or damaged. News of the disaster left Americans stunned, but not for long. A remark attributed to Japanese Admiral Isokuro Yamamoto, who planned the attack, sums up the result of Pearl Harbor. I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant and instilled in him a terrible resolve. And he was right. We had so many heroes created that day, and we lost so many lives that day as well. And in fact, the Arizona is the memorial that's there for those that served or were a part of the Pearl Harbor attack that survived. I believe that many of them have the ability to go back and get entombed in the Arizona once they pass on. Oh, it was just a horrific day. Now, we had not seen anything that heinous done to us since, basically since the Civil War, but definitely from a foreign entity. It's just amazing to me. One of these days, I'm going to have to try and get to Oahu and get to the Arizona just to see the memorial. That's on my list, as well as going to Arlington National Cemetery and the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, probably after I retire. But anyway, the point is that, Yamamoto was right. We as Americans, for the most part, have relished our independence. We have relished the fact that we have been consistently the rogues, and not in a bad way, but the ones that do things on our own, the ones that do things against the stream, that we go upstream against the current. Because if you recall, up until the American Constitution was penned and a government of the people, by the people, and for the people was created, the only type of government that has been out there was either a monarchy or a dictatorship. There had not been a government that was created specifically with the idea that the government gave away or was given rights by the people. There was not a government up until that point that was essentially entrapped and encased in guardrails before the American Constitution was created. And I'm going to tell you that I can't imagine, with all of the things that are starting to come out today, that we have lost that thought process. We have lost that belief in American independence and ingenuity and all these different things that we, originally came to love. And there are so many people out there, especially some who have served, definitely, and they all have said the same thing, that when they go into battle, or generally the same thing, when they go into battle, they're not just fighting for themselves. I mean, obviously, survival is a big thing, but every single one of them understands that when we go into a battle like this, that our heart is with all of the people back home. Our heart is with our country, and making sure that, especially in terms of a situation like this, where our country was attacked by a foreign entity. Now, not that I want to borrow or steal the Pearl Harbor attack, but what I do want to do is I want to remind people of the valor, the heroism, the desire and understanding that one event steeled the resolve of the American people to get involved in something that they thought was a European problem for the most part, with Hitler and Stalin and the French, all of that. We didn't want the American public did not want to get in to World War II originally. We as a public, as a whole, decided that it was something that we didn't need to get involved in until that fateful day on December 7th, which made us into the war machine. And the mobilization that happened has been unprecedented throughout all of history outside of that day. America created new battleships. We created all kinds of new weaponry, and we modified our manufacturing and our factories and mobilized the greatest military fighting force the world had ever seen, because we all had the same resolve. We had been attacked by a foreign entity, and it was time for us to step up and take charge and do the very American thing, which is stand up for truth and justice and the American way. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that same spirit doesn't seem to exist right here. And I'm going to tell you why it doesn't seem to exist. And that is straight up because of the fact that what happened on Friday with the dump that Elon Musk did out of Twitter's internal files should have angered every single red-blooded American, regardless of if you were Republican, if you're Democrat, if you're independent, if you're a leftist, if you're a ultra right-winger, everyone. We should have all looked at this, steeled our resolve, and been like, wow, this is wrong. And let me explain to you simply why. Now, I called it Twittergate. A lot of people are calling it Twittergate, and it's plainly simply put as this. There is compelling evidence that point to a concerted effort, a conspiracy, if you will, not a conspiracy theory, but a conspiracy that the entities within the federal government, our social media outlets, and the Democrat National Committee all conspired to suppress what would have been a monumental story that I've been saying on this show would have changed the outcome of the 2020 elections. And I know I've been taking a little bit of criticism on all kinds of fronts. One of the first fronts that I've taken a little criticism on is because I haven't jumped on the bandwagon of saying that, you know, the voting machines need to be fixed. That's wrong. They do need to be fixed, but unfortunately, it's a 50-state issue. So you have 50 different states that all have different rules and regulations with regards to how they vote that all would have to be fixed at once. It's not going to happen. The probability of getting all of those states fixed is low. The fact that the mail-in voting, mail-in ballots, caused issues, meaning that they leaned Democrat. Absolutely, I'm not arguing that point. But again, it's not significant enough unless you were to look across all 50 states, any place that had mail-in voting. The coordination that would be involved is very, very high. However, modifying the public's impression, and this is across the entire country, was done in one fell swoop by the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story. And I've told you on multiple occasions that there are polls out there that were taken after the election that had the Hunter Biden laptop story come out, okay, had it come out prior to the election, that in general, somewhere in the realm of 16% of the electorate or the people that were polled said that they would not have voted for Joe Biden. And the reason being is not because of all the pics, all the heroin and the hookers and the naked pictures and all of that, because I got hit with that on social media as well. In fact, one person on Facebook wrote that I had a desire to see Hunter Biden's dong pics and revenge porn, and that it was really disgusting of me to think that way. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. 16% of those polled said that it would change their vote. And assuming that you could extrapolate that to across the entire country, that would have been 4 times the amount that Joe Biden actually won in the popular vote. Okay? Joe Biden won by merely 4% of the popular vote. Now, people are saying, well, we don't elect our president by popular vote. You're right, we don't. But in most cases, the Electoral College goes off of whatever the popular vote actually is. There are only a couple of states who actually divide their Electoral College votes. So yes, technically, the popular vote does not elect the president. The Electoral College does. However, again, in most states, it is the popular vote that determines the way of the Electoral College voting. Now, all of that being said, there is, going back and relitigating 2020, which I have something on that too, a little bit later on in the program. is going to be very difficult at best. And the reason being is because the Constitution actually does not have any provision in which you can go back and re-elect, whatever. And Donald Trump said that he was like, hey, we should, redo the election, or at the very least, hand it over to the winner. He said that on True Social. And in that same statement, he mentioned that the Constitution and its rules and regulations need to be thrown out, roughly. But the fact of the matter is, he wasn't actually saying that we need to get rid of the Constitution. What he was saying, or what he was attempting to say in his fury-filled and very uncouth, untactful way, is that the Constitution has no precedent, has no instructions. They didn't even, the framers didn't even consider that you would have a fraudulent election or a manipulation of an election. They didn't even consider it because they actually felt that people would stand up and do the honorable and right thing, because they felt that duty, honor, loyalty, that was all something to aspire to. And they felt that that was going to be the case, and that people would operate within the rules. George Washington started the whole idea of only having a couple of terms as president. He set the precedent before FDR ended up doing 4 full terms. Okay? So up until the point that FDR was actually elected 4 successive times, there wasn't even a inkling from people that somebody would be in power that long. And the reason why the amendment came that limited the president to only 2 terms in office was because of World War II, Hitler, and FDR being voted in 4 consecutive times. Now, all of that lines up with what happened in specificity with Twitter. Okay? Now, keep in mind, Watergate itself was only the mere impression, because it was never proven whether or not Nixon 100% knew about the break-in at the Watergate building and the Democrat headquarters at the time. But he resigned knowing that he had to maintain the integrity of the office. So even though it looked like he knew something about it, he never actually copped to it. And nobody actually was able to prove that he knew about it. Now, the likelihood is there that he did. But the fact of the matter is that he never actually said, yep, I knew all about it. And he held to the integrity of the office. What we see with the release of the information coming out of Twitter is that the Biden campaign, and in conjunction with Twitter middle management, not Jack Dorsey, who was in the top end at the time, although once he became aware of it, he started questioning, what the hell are we doing here? Paraphrase that. But the point being is that middle management at Twitter, which, by the way, many of those same middle managers obtained posts within government or within the Democrat national conglomeration. But the whole idea that there was a collaboration between government entities, social media outlets, and a campaign in order to suppress information should anger every single American out there, because that is specifically what the First Amendment is trying to prevent. Now, keep in mind, the First Amendment and the Constitution itself applies to government. Does not apply to private entities. And the problem is not so much that Twitter did what they did. If they had done it, even just colluding with just the Democrat National Committee and the Biden campaign, yes, it would look nefarious. Yes, it would look very unethical. But the fact of the matter is that the tie-in to the government and the government entities is the problem. Now, if you read through some of the Twitter release, the initial release, there's a second one coming, but there's a reason why it's taking a little while, and I'll explain that in just a second because that popped just last night. But one of the things that came out about the whole Twitter dump is that Ro Khanna, and I'm going to give him credit, Ro Khanna questioned whether or not what Twitter was doing, because he was privy to it, what Twitter was doing was not a First Amendment violation. Now, the only reason that Ro Khanna would call that out is if he knew that government was involved. Okay? He questioned it. So I got to give him props for that. I got to give him props for that. And he's even gone on CNN and talked a little bit about it as well. But the thing about it is that there's a couple other side stories that are going on that all tie in with this. If you remember 2 episodes ago, I talked about the whole process, the Missouri and Louisiana versus the U.S. government. In particular, that case being tried in federal court right now is that the federal court has allowed for the deposition of people like Fauci and a guy by the name of Elvis Chan. Now, Elvis Chan in particular, I have his deposition that was released today in the show notes. If you want to grab it, I'm going to show you a few screenshots, a few important pieces out of it. But Elvis Chan was in charge of the San Francisco office of the FBI and was involved in these meetings that were occurring between Facebook, Twitter, and Google in particular, along with a couple others like Yahoo and Microsoft. And he was in charge of the FBI office. But it's not just him that was doing these meetings. There is indications of CISA, C-I-S-A, which is the Cybersecurity and Information Security Administration. That's an arm of the DHS, was there. He's also indicated that the DOJ was a part of this as well. And I'm going to get to that in just a second. But the point is that the Twitter dumps, most of them had indications of potential involvement of government, but nothing that really implicated anything. And let me explain to you what I mean. Yoel Roth, who worked for Twitter, was in charge of the the information, some kind of safety, the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, I think, went and did an inquiry to what happened. And Yoel Roth provided a sworn statement that essentially, and let me go ahead, I'm going to bring this up. Let me get this up here, because if I don't, you guys are going to get lost here. I'm already kind of getting lost, and I've been reading through this over the course of the last several days, and I got to tell you, okay, I got to find it here. Where is it? There it is. Okay. So, let me get rid of my little guest screen that I put up for Kirk. Okay. So this is an FEC sworn statement by Yoel Roth. It was actually a addendum to a statement that Twitter was not doing in-kind donations to the Democrat National Committee for all of these different things. But in this declaration, Yoel Roth, who was high up in middle management at Twitter at the time, and he basically calls out that since 2018, I have had regular meetings. See if I can get this a little bit larger so you guys can see this. Yeah, okay, this will be good. But since 2018, I have had regular meetings with the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and industry peers regarding election security. Now, the thing about it is that during those weekly meetings, the federal law enforcement agencies communicated that they expected to see hack and leak operations. Now, notice he said the word expected, okay? Keep that in mind. By state actors that might occur in the period shortly before the 2020 presidential election, likely in October. I was told in these meetings that the intelligence community expected that individuals associated with political campaigns would be subject to hacking attacks and that material obtained through those hacking attacks would likely be disseminated over social media platforms, including Twitter. These expectations of hack and leak operations were discussed throughout 2020. I also learned in these meetings that there were rumors of a hack and leak operation would involve Hunter Biden. Okay, so during the time, now keep in mind, there's these meetings originally occurred. And we found this out through depositions and things like that. But these meetings initially occurred monthly, but then they moved up to quarterly. Then they moved up to a monthly. And then the closer that they got to the election, they moved out into, I believe it's a weekly status. Okay. So Joel Roth basically said that the FBI and the DHS and the Office of Director, the ODNI, the National Intelligence Office of the Director, said that they expected that there would be a hack and leak operation that would involve Hunter Biden. Now, keep in mind, this is a sworn statement. So the person doing this is basically saying that, hey, to the best of my knowledge, these are the facts of the case as I am aware. Okay. Now, he pulled that out in the FEC. Now, keep in mind, he talks about on October 14th, he learns of the media coverage that the New York Post had posted articles to its website that morning containing emails and other materials purportedly found on the hard drive that allegedly belonged to Hunter Biden. Okay. Now, Twitter, in their infinite wisdom, went and used the sketchy reasoning for silencing the Hunter Biden laptop story as it was a hacking operation. But there was a gentleman there who was the general counsel for Twitter. He was by the name of James Baker, and James Baker used to be general counsel for the FBI before he moved over to Twitter. Now, James Baker basically said, as a part of the Twitter dump, and I've got the link to the dump, you can go and take a look, but James Baker, paraphrasing here, basically said, I'm not exactly sure that we can call it that. However, we need to err on the side of caution considering what happened in 2016. Now, what he's referring to is the fact that 2016 and the whole Russian hacking and, giving the election over to Trump, which we all know now did not happen, that the Russian hacking, okay, the DNC was hacked potentially, but that nothing was ever really taken. And they still haven't done anything with that, by the way, with the whole DNC hack, even though they keep claiming that it was a big problem. But the thing about it is that James Baker was with the FBI as a general counsel, and then he moves over to Twitter as general counsel. Okay? Now, James Baker features prominently in all of this because of the fact that James Baker has a very storied past. Let me explain what I mean by that. So I just did a quick look did a quick search on the Epoch Times website for James Baker. And James Baker, I got to move, let's go to... So I did a quick search, and James Baker, there's several articles that mention him, but the thing is that it goes all the way back to the whole Russian collusion thing. So Russian collusion, and he actually took the information from Michael Sussman, who we know created that information and the whole Alpha Bank scenario. So James Baker took in the false statements from Michael Sussman about the Russian collusion, which we all know was fake and based off of the claim that was paid for by the Clinton campaign back in 2016. James Baker was also instrumental in getting the FISA warrants against Donald Trump. So this guy's already tainted. Let's just put it out there. He is already tainted. And he resigned from the FBI prior to all of the investigations into his conduct. So he is a total Democrat operative. And he moves over to Twitter, and now he is advising them about, we have to err on the side of caution. We have to make sure that this is, even though they had no evidence at the time that it was actually a hack and leak operation, just the mere suggestion by the FBI, the ODNI, the CISA, all of those people and these meetings, just on the mere suggestion that there could be, they went ahead and suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story. Okay. Now, keep that in mind, because James Baker, as of today, was fired and summarily kicked out of Twitter by Elon Musk. Now, the question is why? Why did that happen? If this guy is really on the up and up, why did that happen? Well, according to some of the reports, there is evidence that James Baker, number one, inserted himself in between by cleaning up all of the Twitter dump from last Friday, as well as had been reviewing and selectively keeping out information from the Twitter files. Now, there's no, at the time that I'm aware right now, there's no evidence that he's actually tampered with anything. However, that could be proven to be different. I'm a little behind because I've been messing around trying to get everything set up, and I hope you're following this. But the key here is that James Baker is not a very good person. And he's gotten fired. He was an ex-FBI official, so on and so forth. And there's even some suggestion, Dan Bongino talked about it on his podcast today, that there's even some suggestion that Elon already knew that James Baker was a bit of a problem and might have set him up, let's say, to keep him from suing Twitter for wrongful termination or something along those lines. But anyway, that is not the key point in my show here, my diatribe. Okay. So we have to ask the question. All right, we have the name. We have Yoel Roth, who basically says that, yes, we met with, all of these intelligence services, and they basically told us that something was coming and that it probably was based off of Hunter Biden or involving Hunter Biden. Well, today dropped another thing which I picked up, the Missouri and Louisiana versus the U.S. Elvis Chan, as I said in the beginning, was deposed by the plaintiff, by the Missouri AG. And the Missouri AG released that deposition. I have a copy of it. I copied a link in the show notes. If you're interested in going to grab it, you can go to the show notes or go into the description of my video and find that link. But the thing about this is that, and I got to find it here. Where is it? I know it's in this list. Here we go. Elvis Chan gave a deposition, And one of the questions, and believe me, it's a long document. It's, I don't know, something like 386 pages long. And it really gets good about about one half of the way down, maybe a little bit less than a half. But it really starts digging into, first of all, he does confirm that he was part of meetings. He also confirms that Google and Twitter and Facebook were all there along with Yahoo. And he does call out Microsoft at a couple of them. He also does say that he does not recall whether or not Hunter Biden was specifically discussed at those meetings. So he sort of is saving a little bit of face. But the thing you have to remember, though, is that there were more meetings than just the one with the FBI that the FBI hosted. There was also the CISA, which is the Division of the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security. They had conversations as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Yoel Roth got it from the FBI directly. He could have gotten it from one of the other agencies during some of the other meetings. However, a couple of things came out of this that were really, really important. And the first thing was that he was discussing outside of those meetings with important people that were a part of those meetings at the social media companies. And one of the things that he did say, based off of the deposition here, and this is the question. So the question is, so he asks about a news article, and also, I got to tell you this. I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumbling up the facts here, but I got to tell you this. So Elvis Chan went to school to get his master's degree. And as a part of his master's degree, he put together a thesis which contained things like doing social media communications and talking between the government and the social media outlets in specificity about things like the Russian hacking, okay, and Russian disinformation in particular. All right. Now, he comes in here and he's asked a question about the conversations that he had outside of those meetings with individuals from the different social media organizations, and whether or not they, what they essentially said about how they felt at these meetings, because he never actually comes out and says 100% that the individuals at the government went and pressured the social media people in the meetings. However, outside of the meetings, these conversations that he had with these individuals indicate that they felt pressured by the federal government. And so the question, this is a series of questions. I only want to give the last one, but this is a series of questions in regards to what his impression after the meetings in talking with these individuals as to what was, how the shall we say, the flavor of the meetings went. And here is a big, big thing. The attorney for Mr. Sauer, so he's the attorney who's the AG, he's the attorney for the plaintiff. He asks the questions, and he basically asks a compound question, but the tail end of it is this. And you infer from that may have led to their changing their terms of service to be more robust and to prevent certain kinds of content from being posted. Is that fair to say? And the witness responds back and says, my personal opinion is that, yeah. My personal opinion is that the political pressure from Congress was a contributing factor. Now, the thing that comes out a little earlier in the deposition is the fact that not only were there government entities like government intelligence entities like the FBI, the DOJ, the DHS there, but they also had congressional staffers in these meetings as well. And these congressional staffers would talk about things like proposed legislation. They would talk about things that, potentially changing legislation in order to make certain things easier, and all of this stuff. So if you go through, and I've only read, honestly, to about where I'm at right now, and believe me, just the amount of information that is in here is just, it's amazing to me. And this is specifically in regards to, again, the Missouri and Louisiana against Biden et al. However, this is showing, and the federal judge in that case basically said that there was enough evidence here that First Amendment violations probably occurred and that the case could move forward into the discovery phase. So that means that Missouri and Louisiana, the AGs, have standing to be able to have moved forward into the discovery phase, which is where this is coming from. So if you remember when I said the process matters 2 episodes ago, this is why. So we are now gaining information based on the differentiating facts of the case, that we now have a pretty clear picture that at least Twitter, if not Facebook and Google, Facebook in particular, we already know Mark Zuckerberg was on Joe Rogan's podcast. He basically said that, yeah, they were getting pressure from the FBI to censor information. This is a huge violation of the First Amendment. And the reason being is because even though these are private entities, government cannot do an end run to get a private entity to do something that it itself cannot do. And so this case is imperative and paramount to our freedoms. And I actually think that this is going to be a huge blow to Section 230 once it finally gets through all of this. There's so much here that I can't even cover it in the time that I have, but there's so much here. I highly encourage you to go get those depositions. And I haven't even looked at the Fauci deposition yet. Fauci apparently, from what I understand, Fauci apparently has claimed that he has no recollection of hardly anything that he did, even though he does say that he would do it all over the same way, all over again, with regards to COVID. I can't even imagine. I was not a deep state believer. I figured there were some bad actors and, things just happen. Now I'm starting to see that there is a potential clear collaboration between several entities within the government. Now, I took a lot of heat on Facebook with regards to this. In fact, one person even mentioned, they laughed and they were like, just remember Trump was in office when all this was coming down. Well, the thing you have to remember, folks, is that Trump may have been in office and he might have been the president of the United States, but he allowed a bunch of these people to stay in their positions. He allowed these higher ups and especially the middle management. Okay. The middle management is where we're talking about this coming from. We're talking about the Carter Page, or not Carter Pages, God, I can't think of her name. But anyway, we're talking about the mid-level managers across both organizations that have caused all of this, that have done this stuff in total defiance of the Constitution. Okay. Total defiance of the Constitution. Now, whether or not they are getting their directives or if they're all just hive minding this, I don't know. But the point here is that this is just incredible. It is a treasure trove, and I cannot wait to see what happens and what comes through on all of this. Because again, as I stated, and this isn't even the one passage that I highlighted. I actually highlighted several other passages up further. And like I said, I haven't even gone through this entire thing yet. I'm only about halfway of the way through. But it is just amazing to me. See, like here, has anyone at the social media platform ever made a comment to you that would reflect that view, which the view is that they came under a scrutiny and public pressure from Congress? And he said, I would say yes. And the types of comments that I have received are that staffers from both those committees I have visited with, those companies, And while they would not reveal the types of discussions that they had with these House and Senate staffers, that they would indicate that they had to prepare very thoroughly for these types of meetings, and that they indicated that it felt like a lot of pressure. They, and the question comes, they is representatives of social media platforms? And he answers yes, the social media platform or the social media companies that were visited. Okay, so again, this right here is just an immense amount, a treasure trove of information that this guy basically has passed on, because it's not just the FBI, it's actually House and Senate staffers at the same time that have pressured this company. Now, all of this leads me to my next conversation. And I'm just going to say right now, actually, I'm going to cancel closing out. I'm just going to, well, I'll get it here in just a second. I'm just going to say right now, I apologize to anybody who was coming here thinking that there was going to be a pet of the week. I do have a couple of submissions, but I'm not prepared to go ahead and ring them out because of the fact that I have something that I need to pass along to you as well. I caught this off of Twitter, believe it or not, and it was pointed in it was pointed at a particular upcoming meeting with the Supreme Court. Now, I don't know if Mark did it. Mark talked about it, but I know that Dan Bongino talked about it. There was a case that was heard today with regards to whether or not the state legislatures, as written in the Constitution, whether or not the state legislatures had ultimate control of federal elections. And the case, I don't have it right in front of me, but the case basically talked about the gerrymandering that was done in North Carolina. Now, the key on the North Carolina case, excuse me, I'm just going to handle this real quick. Now, the case that they're dealing with the North Carolina situation is that it puts into question the independent legislative idea within the Constitution that the state legislatures have full power and control as to the manner of elections. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about it with regards to Congress can choose the date, but that's all that they can do. That the states are the ones that set up the elections and how the elections process is concerned. Now, one of the things that came out was there's some talk that there's an indication based upon the questioning, especially from the conservative justices, that they are not leaning toward the idea that the states have full authoritative control over elections, that there is a partnership between the judicial system and the legislative branch. We'll have to see how that goes. Today was arguments. They'll be issuing their opinions, as we know from Roe v. Wade. They'll be issuing their opinions late in the term, probably not until the first part of next year, first quarter of next year, maybe even second quarter of next year before they break they do their summer break. But the point here, though, is that the question comes up as to whether or not the Constitution clearly and unambiguously states that the state legislatures and the state legislature alone has control over elections. And for those that read the Constitution and take a look at that, I believe it's Article 1, Section 3, if I recall. But anyway, don't quote me on that. I don't remember specifically. But the point is that the idea, there is a group of people who have the idea that the legislatures of the states are the only ones that have control over the manner of how they select their senators, congressmen, etc. And the idea here is that, and this is the purpose of it, is that the court system cannot interfere with that. Meaning that something like what happened in Pennsylvania, where the Pennsylvania courts Supreme Court decided the manner of the elections in I think it was 2020, or maybe a little bit before that because of COVID, and made those changes to the election law, that it was done illegally. Now, Pennsylvania is not part of this, but that is just as an example to this whole thing. This is North Carolina that's doing this, and so it's putting to challenge the narrow view of the idea that the state legislatures, and only the state legislatures, can actually control and manage the election process. Okay? Now, there is another case that is potentially going to show up in front of the Supreme Court. And ironically, this is being brought not because it necessarily has gone through the court system and is in like a standard appellate process. What happened here is there is a case. It is number 22-380. It is what's called a writ of certiorari. And I know I probably mincemeat the pronunciation of that. Spelled Certiorari. A writ of certiorari. Now, what this is this is an old common law phrase that basically says that if a lower court system doesn't have the ability to make a judgment call on something that is so big that it would impact the entire country, essentially, that you can send this petition to the Supreme Court to have the Supreme Court decide what is going on with this. Now, this came out, like I said, I caught it on, and Buddy corrected me. It's Article 1, Section 4 with regards to the state legislatures. I said Section 3, but it's actually 4, just to correct everybody. But the key here is that there is a gentleman out in Utah who is actually representing himself. And he has put a petition in front of the Supreme Court for a writ of certiorari. And what this gentleman is doing, and he's actually a lawyer, he's an attorney, but he has some questions that he is asking the Supreme Court to take into consideration for his case. Now, I'm gonna show you I don't have it highlighted, but I'm gonna show you as soon as I can find it here. Where is it? Here we go. It's this right here. Okay. So this is the questions that are presented, and this is what this gentleman put together. A serious conflict exists between decisions rendered from this court and lower appeal courts, along with constitutional provisions and statutes, in deciding whether or not the trial court has jurisdiction to try the merits of this case. This case uncovers a serious national security breach that is unique and is of first impression, and due to the serious nature of this case, it involves the possible removal of a sitting president and vice president of the United States, along with members of the United States Congress, while deeming them unfit from ever holding office under federal, state, county, or local governments found within the United States of America. And at the same time, the trial court also has the authority to be validated by this court, meaning the Supreme Court, to authorize the swearing in of the legal and rightful heirs for president and vice president of the United States. Now, he kind of goes through a little bit more talking about the doctrines, and you can read the entire thing. But the point here is that he is essentially suing 388 respondents as a party to this action, as defendants in the court. Okay. Now he's got Alma S. Adams, which is where this comes from. So this case is basically Brunson versus Adams. Okay. And Brunson versus Adams, he's basically stating that as a part of this court case, that all of these 388 congressional people, Ted Lieu, Mike Levin, Andy Levin, some other people in here. And then of course, all the way down at the bottom, he calls out Joseph Robinette Biden, as well as Biden Jr., as well as Michael Richard Pence and Kamala Harris, along with a bunch of John and Jane Does that go 1 to 100. And the thing about it is he is basically saying that because there were questions with 2020 that the Congress did not specifically address and did not pause in order for a investigation to occur, pause in certifying the election, that they essentially broke their oath of office and broke several of the amendments of the United States, as well as the Constitution of Utah in particular. So here's the thing, is that he basically says the action, and this is the statement, so the action is against 388 federal officers in their official capacities, which include President Biden, Vice President Harris, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, and former Vice President Pence. All of the respondents have taken the required oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and as such, they are liable for consequences when they violate the oath of office. Respondents were properly warned and were requested to make an investigation into a highly covert, swift, and powerful enemy, as stated below, seeking to destroy the Constitution and the United States. The respondents purposely thwarted all efforts to investigate this, whereupon this enemy was not checked or investigated. Therefore, the respondents adhered to this enemy. Because the respondents' intentional refusal to investigate this enemy, petitioner Brunson brought this action against the respondents because he was seriously personally damaged and violated by this action of respondents, and consequently this action unilaterally violated the rights of every citizen of the United States of America and perhaps the rights of every person living and all courts of law. Okay. So essentially what he is basically saying is that the people who are named in this as the defendants in this case, they all, because they failed to properly investigate the claims that were being made of the fraudulent elections in 2020, that they violated their oath of office to uphold the Constitution, and therefore the court has to take a look at this and judge and rule or whatever, decide whatever they're going to do. Now, the thing about it is this is not an actual case yet. Okay. This is just simply a writ of certiorari. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. It's going to get discussed. The Supreme Court has actually accepted this and has set a meeting for, ironically, January 6th of 2023 for the justices to all get together and discuss this, this writ of certiorari and basically kind of talk about whether or not they would actually take up the case. Now, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't hold any like, I'm not going to hold my breath over this. But it's just kind of interesting the way that this individual has gone ahead and taken it upon himself to go ahead and write this entire thing. And apparently, his argument is essentially interesting enough to the court, the Supreme Court, to be able to go and actually take a look at this. Now, the key about this is that this is going to the Supreme Court because of the fact that the plaintiff claims that none of the other lower courts have the jurisdiction to be able to rule on this case, and that therefore it can't walk through the court system because, the federal court system and in the appellate courts and all the way up to underneath the Supreme Court, none of them have the jurisdiction to be able to hear this case. This is a interesting tack to take. Again, I don't know if it's actually going to go anywhere because of the fact that we have people like Amy Coney Barrett and Chief Justice John Roberts on it. I would guess if I were to take a general poll that you'll hear Clarence Thomas wanted to hear it, that you'll hear Scalia, not Scalia. God, I can't even think of their names now. But I would guess that the most conservative ones, that they will be the ones that'll say, hey, we should have heard it. The middle of the road, even the middle of the road conservatives will probably side with the libertarians and the leftists and the activists on the court, just because of the fact that they want to avoid any kind of trouble for this. And you're right. They should have heard this case, many, many years ago. This should have been, actually, I think they should have taken up the whole Texas thing, Texas versus Pennsylvania, and just gone ahead and done that and been done with it. But for some strange reason, they decided not to. And, honestly, I think they're just going to try and save their asses on this one. I'd be really surprised if it actually goes beyond this meeting on the 6th. But I wanted to bring it to your guys' attention because of the fact that it is so interesting, the methodology by which this individual has brought this up, as well as the facts that he kind of puts out with regards to this. And, he clearly states that over 100 members of Congress claimed factual evidence that said the election was rigged. And the refusal of the respondents to investigate this congressional claim is an act of treason and fraud by the respondents. A successfully rigged election has the same end result as an act of war, to place into power whom the victor wants, which in this case is Biden, who, if not stopped immediately, will continue to destroy the fundamental freedoms of Brunson and all U.S. citizens and courts of law. Yeah, so he puts this out there. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Up until seeing the Twitter dump and seeing some of the information that's coming out of the Missouri versus U.S. case, I am honestly thinking that there might be a possibility of this. If this came out prior to the Twitter dump and prior to the evidence that we are seeing from the other case, there is a possibility that the Supreme Court would have just said, yeah, we're not even going to listen to it. But because they're even entertaining the idea is making me believe that they might actually be thinking, you know what? It's entirely possible that something happened here and that we really should take a look at this case. Now, keep in mind, you've got to remember all of the lower courts, the 60 some odd cases or whatever it was that the left all claims that, there was no evidence. Hardly any of them actually got to the discovery phase in order to get the evidence. Most of them were dismissed because of standing. And if you recall, when I was talking to you about standing, there's 3 parts to standing in a court system. One is that you were definitely wronged, meaning the plaintiff itself was definitely wronged. Okay. 2 was that you were wronged by an illegal action of whoever the defendant actually is. And point number 3 is that the court has the ability to do something about that problem should the favor or should the case go your way. Can the court order anything? Well, this is going to be interesting to watch. Extremely interesting to watch. especially after this this January 6th committee that they have. And this is actually on the docket. I mean, I can tell you right now it is. I can show you right here. Go ahead and no. Yeah, it could be this one. Yeah, okay. So right here, I don't know if you can see it, but right here it says distributed for conference of 1/6/2023. So they actually took a look at it and they've basically been like, hey, you know, this might have something to it, so we should discuss it. So that's at least the first foot in the door kind of scenario as to why I'm thinking that maybe they might actually think about this. It was originally docketed in October 24th of 2022. And the decision date, or the original decision date, was October 6th. Now on October 20th is when it was filed. And the response was due by November 23rd. On November 23rd, the U.S. waived their right to respond. Now, this is where it's kind of interesting. Because the U.S. didn't bother to respond, the DOJ didn't bother to respond, that indicates that they actually think that the Supreme Court probably won't even take it up. So, again, it's kind of questionable. We're going to have to see how this comes out and how this breaks out. I personally think that the Supreme Court should actually take it up. They should just say, look, we want to get this over with. You know, the country can't be healed until we have this final thing, which is sort of what they did with the whole Bush v. Gore situation. They were like, look, we just got to get it over with. You know, they may have that same philosophy in terms of, you know, doing this. They might just say, hey, look, we might as well just hear this out and just see where this thing goes. You know, again, the court is kind of surprising on some things because, like, with the whole situation, yeah. So apparently, Outlaw Dogs is saying that a brother of Bunsen was on Wendy Bell Radio and discussed the case and said that the Supreme Court was asking for more information. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be kind of interesting to see, but like I said, this popped and I looked at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, this might actually change the course of history. This could be a serious history making case. And if that's the case, 2022, 2023, the Supreme Court, we've had so many court cases that have come through in terms of this that are highly politically charged. I mean, Roe versus Wade, the whole Dobbs decision and the overturning of Roe versus Wade was a big one. But we're also talking about religious freedom, which, based on the questions that the conservative justices were asking about that web designer, Mark Kay talked about it. You know, everybody is all talking about it because of some of the questions and how they were asked. That case very well could fall to religious freedom. Now we have today's case, which talks about how our elections are done in terms of constitutionally. I mean, that's a toss up. This one is another one that is a very, very close thing to look at and to watch. It's going to be interesting. Totally interesting. We are looking at history here, people. We're looking at history right here, right now, with the First Amendment violations, with which, again, you know, the federal court had agreed that Missouri and Louisiana had standing. But this is going to be a big one, I think, if it goes through. All right, folks. Oh my gosh. I also want to end this on a note going back to Pearl Harbor, but I want to end this on a note. obviously there were a lot of things that have come out in terms of Pearl Harbor earlier today, but I wanted to end the program reading this that I caught on Twitter. And this came from Janine Strange, and she mentions that this is a quote from Pearl Harbor survivor Donald Stratton's book, All the Gallant Men. So this is the quote, and I want to read it to you. "We were ordinary men. What was extraordinary was the country we loved. We loved who she was, what she stood for. We loved her for what she meant to us and for what she had given to us, even in those meager times. It didn't matter where you hailed from, whether you came from the mountains or the prairies, a sprawling city or a small coastal town. You loved her. We all did. More than the states we left behind, our homes, the careers we gave up. As too many would prove, we loved her more than our very lives. The battleships and destroyers at Pearl Harbor were named after states from where some of us had been raised: Ohio, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Maryland, California, West Virginia, Utah, Nevada. Those vessels moored in that harbor so far from home reminded us where we came from. The battleship I served my country on was the USS Arizona." Folks, I was going to name this tonight's episode, "Has America Lost Her Principles?" And I'm going to be honest with you. I think we have. I think there are a lot of us who are, especially those of us who are on the left, who are in the totalitarian communist regime pocket and thinking. They've lost our principles. We've lost our way. We've lost the idea that America is the standout beacon of freedom and light and honor and duty, truth, justice. We've lost our principles. As a society, we've lost them. I know there's individuals out there like myself and several of my, almost all of my listeners right now. You're within the sound of my voice. You're listening to me because of the fact that I bring truth and honesty to what you feel inside. I bring that through my voice, through my videos, in discussing all of the things that I do. But people, Lady Liberty and Uncle Sam are on the ropes. Now, I'm not talking about us getting involved in a physical struggle or a physical fight over this, but we have got to get serious. We cannot allow stuff like this, what happened at Twitter, what's going on in our government today. We cannot allow that to happen. We need to mobilize and get just as active as the other side. Now, the other side does have one advantage that the right honestly doesn't. And that is because of the fact that they have the ability to all glom together as one voice. The Republicans have not done that. We have infighting happening even now. And I know that having McCarthy as a speaker honestly is not the choice. I wouldn't want to choose him. But one thing that Mark Levin has been talking about the last couple of days, and I got to tell you, listening to his program or his podcast after his program, I got to tell you, he's right on this one. We've spent way too much time infighting. We have spent way too much time squabbling over the littlest things that are part of essentially who's a better conservative. People like Representative Biggs, who sounds really, really good on Twitter, but in actuality doesn't have the votes to be able to become Speaker of the House. We need to set aside those little differences and all come together to unite in one common goal, and that is to save this country, to save our republic, our beloved America, our flag, our Statue of Liberty, and our Uncle Sam. To be able to stand up in one voice and get together and say to the axis of evil that is out there that wants to destroy our nation, we need to stand up and say in one voice, not today. We have got to get active. We have got to get active in our schools, in our communities, and we need to start doing more to get the message out, because the Republican Party has not been able to do that. They have not been able to effectively put forth a coherent message. And that was reflected in the loss of Herschel Walker. Now, Georgia's Herschel Walker didn't have a good message. And the reason why I say he didn't have a good message is because if you look at the statistics, almost all of the other Republicans that ran in their races in the state of Georgia won. He was in a neck-and-neck race with Raphael Warnock. And he lost because his message was not getting out there. Now, not all places are going to have the ability to have this. I know. I live in the state of Washington. Western Washington has got the entire state locked up in a liberal nightmare. But that doesn't mean that we can't go to those places that are purple, and we can't energize to get things done. That's what happened for World War II. That's what happened, honestly, in World War I. That's what happened during the American Revolution. That's what happened during the Civil War. America, at its very core, is and has a heart that beats for the underdog. We overtake insurmountable obstacles in order to claim victory. If you look throughout our history, just about every single engagement that we have had, whether it's been in war or whether it's been in peacetime, think about JFK. JFK said, we will walk on the moon before the end of the century. Or before the end of the decade, I think is actually what he said. And in 1969, we had somebody on the moon. We had a footprint and a flag on the moon. To my knowledge, it's the only flag that was ever planted on that surface. We have people like Elon Musk doing amazing things with SpaceX. We are a country of innovators. We are a country of doers. We are a country of achievers. And right now we are facing an enemy, not from outside, but from within. And we need to stand up, and we need to basically tell these people, no, that we are done with all of these antics. The Republican Party, if there is anybody in the Republican Party that is listening to my voice right now, you need to stop. You need to quit capitulating to these people. We need to start writing to our congressmen, to our senators. We need to start, representatives and senators, congressmen as a whole. We need to start demanding proper representation. I guarantee you, if we flood them, because honestly, we've got to get involved. I know we're busy. I understand that. I get it. Even myself, I keep saying, hey, I'm too busy to do X, Y, whatever. You know, we've got our own lives. But you know what? Our lives will mean nothing if we allow this country to fail. It was called the American experiment when it was put together. It was an experiment of essentially a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's time for the people to take it back. And that's my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Do me a favor, if you like what I do, if you like the program, please subscribe. Head on over to Rumble, get yourself an account. I am at 451 over on Rumble. 451 subscribers. Thank you. Thank you so much. You have made my goal of getting 450 by the end of the year possible. Still like to see more. I know I'm not quite at 400 followers on Facebook. If Facebook is your choice, go over there. I noticed that over on Twitch, which I'm transmitting to right now, that I picked up 8. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here on the Whiskey Musings broadcast. Good night, everybody.